Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
Monoma Nido was born in a small hospital in a small town in the middle of the desert. The son of a woman whose quirk allowed him to memorize fighting styles and a man with a quirk that allowed him to copy speech and writing styles. Two imitators who produced a child who was the biggest imitator of them all. And from the very first day of his birth, Monoma copied something, the memories of a person. Born with blonde hair and a thin scar-like birthmark across his left eye, he opens his eyes to reveal purple irises. Thus the copy ninja became the copy boy. Monoma Nido opened his eyes to see a blurry world of bright lights and white ceilings, people dressed in hospital gowns, and a man and woman leaning over him with tears in their eyes. He wakes up in a world he knows is not his, a world where shadows dance in every corner. He wakes up in a world where people have powers, quirks, wakes up to people wondering and expecting, what will his quirk be? He is born into a family where the woman tries her best to give love but doesn't have enough time, and a man who is not at home and often looks at everything with an empty gaze. His early years were filled with parental neglect, sitting alone in an empty room with stuffed animals to keep him company. He did not speak for 2 years, opening his mouth once to ask, "What is a quirk, Mom?" It reminds him of the days when his father left, previous P died, went on a mission. His second childhood is filled with little books, videos, and new discoveries. He wakes up in a world where again not all men and women are equal, and where everything depends on one single factor that you cannot control. Monoma wants him to get a moderate quirk to live a normal life. He knows that's his only wishful thought. With a sharp kunai in his hand, his father runs towards him in panic. His third year is a whisper of, "What will it be?" and "I bet he'll have the same copycat quirk as his parents." He ignores the whispers and continues to read and read and read about the new world, about other worlds and about the past. This is not the past of his world. About new people. About wars, human experiments, about the standards passed down by society. He stops holding his mother's hand as she leads him into a store, and watches a costumed man fighting someone who has robbed a bank. Heroes are reality, and shinobi are a thing of the past. "Father, I want to be a shinobi." He is 4 years old and now has a copy quirk that is as strong as it was in that life. He activates it, looking at both of his parents as they wait. He looks at them with one purple eye and one red eye that rotates with a distinct floral pattern. The next day he registers her with a rather simple, copycat. Whispers of a child prodigy are shaking the streets. He is 5 years old and now goes to school. The other children stop and whisper, looking at his tired eyes. No one lets him get close enough to copy anything. The adults whisper behind his back. A perfect combination, on the one hand. And have you heard that he can copy quirks? With fear on the other. Monoma copies his first quirk when he is 5 years old, a quirk that allows him to manipulate paper to some extent. His mind is filled with memories of blue hair, paper roses, and angel, as is the paper butterfly dancing in his palm. He uses a quirk red flower spinning to create hundreds of paper origami, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3, 8, 10. He loses consciousness and does not wake up for 2 days. His memories are filled with information about chakra depletion. "What a disgrace your father is," the unknown man mocks him from top to bottom. Monoma is 6 years old, and his mother cries for him when he doesn't wake up for 7 days. She begs him to be careful, and he promises, because even if his mother is careless, she tries and brings home the best she can. He doesn't love his father. He didn't come home for 2 weeks. He returns to school, once again ignoring the whispers and stares, and trudges through life as he is. Books are his escape, an escape from the world behind him, an escape from his mind, and an escape from his thoughts. A paper butterfly dances on his fingers and he feels his stamina slipping away. He is small enough that he can spend half a day with a paper butterfly dancing around his fingers, stopping when he feels his stamina drop below 1/4. Monoma hasn't tried to go down to 3/4 in a long time, and instead spends his time training as much as his childish body can handle, building up his stamina for the future. He finds his father on the floor of his house, a tanto pierced through his stomach. He is 7 years old and a paper butterfly can dance on his fingertips most of the day. He copies his second quirk, just water, a manipulation quirk that can direct a small stream. Paper butterflies nest in his hair and water dances on his fingers. He falls asleep for 13 hours and wakes up still exhausted. He doesn't know the girl whose quirk he's borrowing, he passed her in the hallway. He loved to play with water, letting it splash on sunny days to make a little rainbow while reading books. The blonde man beams at him as he ruffles his spiky hair. He is 8 years old and his father has died. Monoma returned home to his crying mother. She gave him only one hard look and then hugged him tightly, sobbing into his jacket. "Oh, Nito, your father is gone." "Gone or died?" "Dead. He was dead." His mother had become even more frail, spending more time at work to support the family. Still, she smiled at him when he showed her how well he was doing at school. Her lavender eyes were growing duller as she became more and more tired. He copies another quirk, increased speed, then another, claws. He becomes more isolated as paper butterflies fly around his head and fingertips. He will become like his father, they whisper in the streets as the war rages. He is 8 years old and is the best in his class. Other students look at him with envy, spreading rumors and trying to sabotage him. The first time someone tried to bully him by taking his lunch money. Trying, to be precise. Monoma lunged forward with his foot, sending the bully flat on his back. No one tried to bully him anymore. He copies again and gets the chain quirk. White chains intertwine in the air, reminiscent of the golden chains whistling through the air as they wrapped around the cubie. A paper butterfly floats in the air as the fog creates a rainbow. Lightning flashes in his hand as he lunges at the bandit. He is 9 years old and makes a friend. His name is Tetsu, and his quirk is steel. Monoma asks permission to copy it, and Tetsu allows him, only telling Monoma to call him Tetsu. They sit under the tree where he usually reads, and a paper butterfly nests in Tetsu's hair, and thin white chains sway in the air. His mother is happy for him, and Monoma gives her a soft, rare smile as he prepares dinner. "Pakin, please track this scent," the little pug nodded and began to sniff the ground. He is 10 years old and his mother is sick. "Poor child," they say. "Haven't you heard? His mother is very ill." He ignores them, ignores pity, ignores everything. He sits with Tetsu and lets paper butterflies dance on the blades of grass while he reads a book. "Sorry, I had to help an old lady with groceries, and then." He is 11 years old and his mother has not left the hospital. She is alive, but the doctors say she may not live 2 years. He will take these 2 years for himself and take care of his mother. The next day, he brings ramen so she can have something other than the bad hospital food. Monoma remembers the blonde hair and fox-like whiskered cheeks, and smiles along with Tetsu when he introduces him to his friend. Her name is Itsuka Kendo, and her quirk allows her arms to grow in size. It allows him to copy the ability, the red eye spinning when he tests the quirk. He makes a new girlfriend and her name is Itsuka. The paper butterfly now nests in their hair, and Monoma remembers the orange glasses and the medical bag. "Let me fix you up," a green glow from a pair of caring hands. He is 12 years old and his friends want to be heroes. "You should be one too." Itsuka smiles at him, waving his arms in the air and imitating a karate move. "I'm not a hero," says Monoma, holding a paper butterfly on his finger. "What? Bro, you're so manly and you'll definitely become a great hero." Tetsu exclaims, grabbing Monoma's shoulders. "Your quirk is manly, and you're a great friend. Come on, be a hero with us." He nods reluctantly, and a paper butterfly flies into Tetsu's spiky hair. "Okay, for you guys." His mother congratulates him through a slight cough and smiles at him. "You will be a great hero, Nito." He has over 100 quirks under his belt, some useless and some powerful. He is smart with his quirk and makes sure to keep training at the top of his list to keep his stamina high. "Take my Sharingan." He is 13 years old and can do tricks that his peers cannot even imagine. It's not muscle memory, Monoma knew how to do it, but he didn't have a muscle memory for it. So he trains with the speed and agility of his quirks until he can finally do something like what he used to do. Big jumps, impossible turns and flips, fancy footwork. He relearns it all. During the time he trains, he exhausts himself more often than he should. He worries his friends by slipping into sleep for 2 weeks. He wakes up and finds himself in the hospital, Itsuka lightly hitting him for making them worry. He had so much homework from school that needed to be done. Birds chirp as blood drips from his hand. Kakashi. He copies quirks, sometimes even catching a passing touch from pro heroes so he can use abilities when it comes to risk. Like last year, he spends part of his time unconscious, anywhere from 3 hours to a week. He is 14 and has 2 weeks left before the exam to enter UA. He is 14 years old and his mother is dying. He is 14 years old and he is going to take an exam. This is the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. He rushes through the fake city, trying to keep his quirk usage to a minimum. Instead, he uses a long spear found in one of the buildings. Monoma doesn't ask why it was there, just takes it and uses it, stabbing the robot in the chest. He has 34 points and dives in to save the girl from being crushed by concrete. He quickly checks to make sure she's okay before stepping back and punching the robot in the head. Monoma jumps and lands in the middle of a group of robots. He quickly destroys them all and decides to stay behind. He has 40 points when the giant zero-pointer arrives. Seeing all the examinees running away and not bothering to help those left behind, Monoma grits his teeth and gets to work. He uses the clone quirk he copied from Ectoplasm, diving down and picking up those left behind, quickly moving away from the zero-pointer. Monoma finishes the exam with 40 points, with less stamina than he would like, and in a good mood. He gets 100 in the written exam. Kakashi, you are now an Umbu Hound. Young Nido Monoma. Congratulations. You've gone beyond the standards. You've earned 40 points for taking down villains, mostly without using your quirk, as well as 30 points for saving. I'll give you a total of 70 points. You're the second highest scorer among the applicants. See you in UA, plus Ultra. Monoma watches as the hologram closes and puts the letter back in the envelope. Next week he moves out of his apartment and into his new home in the UA dorm. He was placed in Class 1A, and both of his friends were placed in 1B. They made him promise to remain friends. A paper butterfly dances in the air. Comment to 1. Say hello. Honestly, this FIC reminded me of the Zoro FIC, Trading Places, One Piece, in style. At least, I thought it would be wise to format it so that it would be easier for you, and for me in about 2 years, to read. == 2. Who are you? == He is 14 years old and a student at UA, Class 1A. His name is Monoma Nido and he has a quirk called Copycat. That's what he tells himself every morning, to reassure himself that this is his world and where he belongs. He tries not to think about the blonde, pink, and black hair, the animal masks, and the weird red and white hat, but he still thinks about it. He can't help but think about it. Monoma stands in his dorm room in front of the bathroom mirror, ignoring the fact that he is alone. Other than him, only 2 other UA students, one from the general education class and one from the business class, live in the first-year dorm. They left 2 minutes ago, and Monoma was left alone with his thoughts in the huge empty building. He pulls on his uniform, fiddling with his mask and tying his tie. He wraps his jacket around his waist, grabs his bag and heads out the door. Class begins in 45 minutes, and Monoma spends the time walking around the building, finding the best escape points and hiding spots. He watches the cameras and looks for blind spots. He peers into the trees to find vantage points. Once he's done, he heads to where he remembers his classroom being. He finds the room with 4 minutes left before class starts and 3 people blocking the entrance. He carefully pushes past them, making sure to touch them all at the same time. He now has 3 new quirks. The blonde boy finds his seat, thank goodness for the seating chart on the wall. His seat is second in the back row by the window and in front of the spiky-haired girl, next to the bird-headed teenager, and opposite him is a mint-haired boy. He then tests the collected quirks. Monoma quickly comes to the conclusion that the first specimen is not for him. He does not have the necessary legs for such a thing, but he will keep it nonetheless. If it comes to that, the quirk will change his legs. It will definitely be painful, but let's save it for emergencies. The second one is more interesting, and he has to figure out how to activate and deactivate it. Activation and deactivation obviously involve using his fingers, and he ignores the pain spikes as the pads eliminate gravity. He watches the pencil rise into the air, then puts his hands together and catches it. The third quirk. What the hell? He takes a chance to look at the kid he copied her from. He's a green-haired boy with lots of freckles, and Monoma can't help but stare at him with wide eyes. Because he had copied this quirk before. Monoma can fully confirm this because he recognized it. This quirk. Omnipotent. How the hell did this kid get a quirk exactly like All Might's? He peers deeper into the quirk, letting the familiar tingle run across his skin, causing him to frown. And then he notices something he hadn't noticed before. It was a stock quirk, and Monoma can feel traces of other quirks in it. He frowns again and a yellow sleeping bag rolls into the classroom, tells them to go to the training ground, and throws bags full of sports uniforms at them. Monoma staggers to his feet, noting that his stamina is low from the experiments he did, but he knows he can survive the day. He'll go to bed early after school, but it's too bad he's already a little tired. Class has just started. He lets the paper butterfly in his hair dissolve, stuffing the paper into his pocket as he follows the others into the locker room. He has to conserve every ounce of his energy to keep from collapsing and sleeping for 15 hours. Quirk test. Monoma can do it, it should be pretty easy. He stands among the other students, next to a tall teenager with 6 arms wearing a mask like his, listening to his new teacher explain. Pink hair and black squirrels, Edo Tensei? His mind whispers, rebels, and the last one to arrive will be banished. And so they begin, with a new threat, telling them they must do their best or fail. The first test is a 50-meter dash, and he's paired with a teenager with lightning burning through his yellow hair. The other guy smiles, and they both slide into a running position. He searches for something within himself, letting his eye rotate into the 3-tomo flower, and moves when a click is heard. He uses a speed quirk, the fastest one he has, and is at the end of the finish line. 1.8 of a second, the car beeps, and a few seconds later the second blonde appears. Hey, dude, that was terrible, the blonde smirks at him as they step away to let the next class pass. I'm Kaminari Denki, and you? My name is Monoma Nito, nice to meet you, and his eyes twist into crescent moons as he remembers the boy with the same hair color and a similar aura to Kaminari. My name is Tenzo, and the boy jumps back with the girl in his arms. He is given a small device and Aizawa tells them to squeeze the handle as hard as they can. Monoma does this using one of his less powerful power quirks and controls the process to get a decent result of 134 kilograms. He is pleased with what he gets and is placed 5th in the challenge. He watches another masked boy grip the device tightly enough to push the number up to 540 kilograms, and doesn't think about the silly hairdos, the green latex, and the grip strength contest they did. My name is Uchiha Itachi, a small boy, no older than 13 years old. Next up is the standing long jump, and Monoma watches as the spiky-haired boy uses explosives to propel himself into the air and leaps across the sand. He watches as another blonde uses a laser from his stomach, and the teenager also clears the sand area. He watches the green-haired child with his familiar quirk, but the teenager doesn't jump over the line in the sand. Monum himself flies over the mark and feels slightly sleepy. Let's go, Yamato, I'll take you inside and patch you up, the white and red fox mask. Repeated side steps are next, and Monoma gets a normal score for the test. No one got particularly outstanding scores. The green-haired guy is ranked 13th on this list. Monoma is ranked 8th. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I am going to become Hokage. It's time for the ball toss, and Monoma remembers how the spiky-haired boy did 700 meters or so on that test, and looks at the green-haired kid who hasn't used his strength quirk yet. Can a child know how to use a quirk? If he doesn't, that's bad. Monoma will find a way to help another teenager. Out of the corner of his eye, Monoma sees All Might peeking around the corner, and almost laughs. Maybe the green-haired one is All Might's child or some other relative? The green-haired one uses his quirk, breaks his finger and gets 1/10 of a point beyond the spiky-haired one that tried to attack him. Aizawa holds him back and Monoma, Chidori and Rasengan, contacts the man as he goes in for his ball throw. He gets 500 meters with a small power quirk, and feels like he can go find himself an energy drink. I'm Sakura Haruno. He could sense someone else's fanaticism. Next up is long distance running, and the girl sitting behind him in class is making a fucking scooter. He comes in third on the test and he stops because he doesn't want what's left of his stamina to drop to the bottom. Sasuke Uchiha, I want to kill one person. The next 2 tests are fairly easy, and overall Monoma is in 7th place, feeling satisfied. Midoriya-san. He stops in front of the green-haired teenager and looks into the eyes opposite. Can you control your quirk? The answer was a stuttered no, and Monoma tells him to meet him at the newly cleared Dagoba beach tonight at 7, and leaves. He makes eye contact with All Might, who is standing around the corner, and also silently tells the man to meet them at the beach. Midoriya-san, please activate your quirk, but don't use it. Monoma stands in front of Midoriya, and he knows that All Might is there, watching them from the side path. Midoriya doesn't know this, but he probably guesses, and activates his quirk in his unbroken arm. He feels the energy Midoriya is worried about crackling around the limb and nods. You can stop activating it. What are you going to do? Midoriya asks, still tired from the long day, but interested. Let me show you. You're using All Might's quirk incorrectly. Midoriya freezes before rushing forward and grabbing Monoma's arms, and All Might also appears in the blink of an eye. How do you know? They say at the same time, and Monoma smiles under his mask. My quirk, he replies and gently pushes them both away, takes Midoriya aside and tells him to stretch the energy for balance, rather than squash it into concentration. He tells him not to use the quirk 100%, but to dilute it first and gradually build it up. He then snaps his finger, exploding the water. Watches as Midoriya does, but does so with about 2%, tells the teen to use 2% as well, says that All Might will teach Midoriya better, and returns to the dorm. Midoriya has a silver paper rose tucked into his hair. He himself can't use more than 30% of his power without being incapacitated. The one time he used 100%, he slept for a week and got a broken arm. All Might's quirk is for emergency situations only. He sleeps and is almost late for class the next morning. You 3 aren't genin yet, he then smiles, looking at their shocked faces. Heroic training. All Might bursts into the room, and Monoma feels his gaze on him. They are given their hero costumes, and Monoma gathers the pieces of himself and goes to the locker room to change. His suit is pretty unique, but he figures it can't be as bad as a weird kid with ice covering half his body. His outfit is an Umbra uniform, complete with a dog mask. Bandages are wrapped around his free limbs, and a bag of kunai and shuriken is quickly added to his body via straps. He can tell himself that this is his world now, but he cannot let his old one slip away completely. Midoriya tells him that his suit looks cool, and Kaminari adds that he looks like a ninja. His eyes crook into half moons as he compliments their costumes, and tries not to laugh at Midoriya's bunny hood. Now Tazuna-san and I need to talk. He is paired with a spiky-haired girl who sits behind him, whose name is Momo Yaoyorozu. Her quirk is amazing and he asks if he can copy it. She doesn't understand what he means and shakes his hand. He then asks her how it works as they watch the monitors where Spike Boy and Midoriya are fighting. Midoriya works with the 2% he has under control, but Monoma can see him dodging the attack every time. Yaoyorozu tells him how everything works. Monoma shakes his head and asks Yaoyorozu if she can make a tanto for him. She can, and when she does, Monoma watches as Midoriya blows a hole in the ceiling and the floor of the top floor and just wreaks havoc. Midoriya's team wins. Midoriya himself has his arm broken from the ability, and Monoma is left twirling a sharp tanto in his hands as Yaoyorozu hands him the sheath, and he hands her an energy bar. She smiles at him in surprise, and he returns her gaze. He makes a note to mention the soldiers' calorie pills to the support department. It would be an interesting project. Sharingan Kakashi, give me the old man. He walks and bumps into a teenager with spiky red hair and a girl with cords hanging from her earlobes. He lets Yaoyorozu plan out the attack sequence and he lets her learn the basics of his quirk. She understands what he meant earlier, the reality surprises her, and continues planning with Monoma making suggestions. They're eager to win, and Monoma breaks the tanto by hitting it too hard at a red-haired kid who is literally a copy of Tetsu. Hell, they even have the same type of quirk. He thought he was a copycat here. Tree walking. Once you master it, I'll give you a new jutsu. The day ended and Monoma saw Midoriya revealing something about his quirk to the spiky-haired teenager, Bakugo, and sighed in annoyance. A paper butterfly follows him as he walks to the UA dorm. == 3. And we will start from scratch again == Monoma Nido is 14 years old and is in Class 1A, and he is currently very annoyed. Reporters block his way to get into his school. They crowd the school's main gate, trying to catch every student who enters. Monoma lives in the UA dorms, and they are right next to the campus, but still, he still goes through the main gate for a sense of normalcy. Usually it helps a little, but today it's not because of the damn reporters. He only has a shoulder past them, and so many try to catch an interview with him. He decides to ignore them or has to kick the cameraman out of the way. One tries to grab him, and he ignores the urge to scream sexual assault as loudly as he can. Please don't disturb me, he tells them, and then walks into the building. Aizawa says that they have to choose the class president and vice president after scolding Bakugo and Midoriya. He then crawls into his sleeping bag to take a nap. Monoma blinks as basically every other teenager in the class tries to volunteer to be class president, but no one can decide who it should be. Eventually, Ida has to order them to participate in the vote, and they obey. Monoma absent-mindedly writes down Ida's name and quickly hands it over. Anyway, Midoriya becomes class president and Yaoyorozu becomes vice president. Somehow, Monoma gets one vote and he doesn't know why or how. Aizawa then wakes up from where he was dozing after their vote and quickly explains what the class president is supposed to do. Monoma is glad he's not class president, it seems too much trouble. Apparently some of his classmates think so too. Here, this is the correct form. It's lunchtime now, and Monoma is sitting alone with Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. Itsuka and Tetsu tried to sit next to him, but their classmates from Class 1B dragged them away, chatting non-stop. They gave him an embarrassed smile before following their classmate to the table. He wasn't really bothered by it, they obviously wanted to get to know their new classmates better. But as he pulled out a book from his bag, Todoroki and Yaoyorozu slid into the empty seats. All three are silent and barely speak. Thus, Monoma is content enough to let the paper butterfly fly through the air. He assumed that from what Todoroki and Yaoyorozu knew about him, they would be fine sitting with him. Monoma reads his book and then almost drops it. A large, roaring sound reverberates throughout the dining room, sending the children into a panic. Level 3 violation. The electronic sign reads, and the lights flash. Children scream and people stream towards the exit. Monoma himself sits at the very top of the table to avoid being knocked down by a panicking student, while being very indifferent to the disorder. Todoroki is also sitting at the table, and Yaoyorozu has already disappeared into the crowd, either in search of teachers or classmates. Perhaps even flooding the exit, like the other children. He then closes his eyes, letting his quirk spin into life. He chooses a sensory quirk and tries to choose a person different from the others. He quickly finds it, and the unknown person is in a building, in an area where no one else is and has a dark presence. After he is sure of the location, he quickly uses his clairvoyance quirk to find out who it is. There was a teenager, older than them, and he had the most chapped lips Monoma had ever seen. He quickly memorizes the teenager's appearance and stops using his clairvoyance quirk. On a second note, the media also floods the building. After turning off his quirk, Monoma opens his eyes and looks at the chaos in the cafeteria. He feels slightly tired, and his eyes itch in pain from the clairvoyance quirk that flickers at the edge of his consciousness. He spots Midoriya among the panicking teenagers, and the poor boy is almost trampled. Monoma then watches with a raised eyebrow as Uraraka sends Ida flying into the air with her gravity quirk. Ida waves his arms for a minute before slamming his feet into the wall above the door. Please calm down. Ida yells at the top of his lungs, and, surprisingly, everyone actually does calm down. It's just the press. Then, after the chaos, Midoriya hands over the position of class president to Ida. Naruto, come here, I'll teach you the wind jutsu. Aizawa-sensei, Monoma stands in front of his teacher, and the tired man looks up at him. What's happened? During lunch, an unknown man snuck into the building. I remembered what he looked like and drew his face. he placed a piece of paper in front of Aizawa, who rubbed his eyes. How do you know what he looked like? My quirk, Monoma simply answers, and Aizawa takes the piece of paper. Copycat, right? Aizawa asks, studying the portrait. Yes. Okay, I'll tell the director, go home. Monoma nods and leaves the classroom. He doesn't return to the dorm, instead wandering through the school's woods. He returns before curfew. Sakura, take some medical scrolls that might interest you. A rescue training trip to a place called USJ. It sounds interesting, and Aizawa tells them it's okay to wear their suits. Monoma decides to put on his costume, hands Yaoyorozu a bag of high-calorie chips, and asks her to make him 2 tanto. She creates them for him and he attaches one to his waist and the other to his back. Ida then leads them to the bus and tries to line them up in the wrong order. Monoma sits next to Todoroki, who is trying to sleep. He watches as the bus pulls away and people start talking about quirks. Your quirk is similar to Almighty's. Monoma snorts quietly and gets a glare from Todoroki. The other teens on the bus continue to chat and Monoma hears. You want to talk about something really cool? Todoroki, Bakugo, and Monoma are totally cool. Yes, Monoma's sword skills are so manly. Kirishima says, and Monoma laughs internally at his resemblance to Tetsu. I don't know about Bakugo, but he's such an idiot that he probably won't be popular. Bakugo then proves Tsuyu's point and Kaminari calls him out on his shitty personality using clever words. By the way, what's Monoma's quirk? Midoriya wonders. During the battle simulation, he explained to me what his quirk was, Yaoyorozu begins to say. It's called copycat. Yeah, same as the name, Monoma says, and the other teens look at him. I can copy quirks to a certain extent. When I use my quirk heavily, I sleep for 48 hours or more. Monoma, it's a coma. Sounds gloomy. Go after Sasuke, Naruto. Be careful. The villains attack, and Monoma pulls his Umbu mask over his face. He has to be serious. One wrong choice or attack, and all of his classmates could be hurt or killed. He stands guard in front of the group that wasn't teleported, his tanto sliding into his hand. I won't let you hurt them, he growls, and then activates Aizawa's quirk. His hair flies up, and Kurogiri's mist begins to disappear. He ignores the itch in his eyes, ignores the slight strain on his stamina, and moves as fast as he can to land a punch into Kurogiri's chest plate. He blinks and Kurogiri's mist returns. He dodges it, activates Aizawa's quirk again, and uses All Might's quirk at 10% to kick Kurogiri across the square. He feels the exhaustion starting to spread, but he doesn't pay attention to it. Instead, he uses the second quirk he first copied, tells Ida to run, and spreads a heavy fog over the square. And he lets his Sharingan turn to face the world. He silently creeps through the fog, taking out baddies left and right, and slowly moves to where he can hear Aizawa fighting. The chains whip silently through the air, and the heavy fog continues to obscure his view. This is a stealthy, foggy, silent killing technique at its best, Monoma thinks as he rises up behind the villain and knocks him out faster than the beast can think. He lets the whirlpool disappear and the fog remains, but begins to dissipate. Monoma moves and his tanto attacks the main villain. He can recognize the main one. The one who first invaded UA. Out of the corner of his eye, he sees his teacher and gives him a smile before attacking. The villain dodges by an inch, and clumps of hair float through the air as Monoma continues to struggle, the flower pattern spinning. When the villain tries to use his quirk, Monoma erases it and delivers a heavy blow. Nomu. The beast moves, and Monoma feels the whistle of the wind as he dives under the attack and stabs. Jumping away from the creature, he watches as the wounds heal and prepares to fight again. The main villain brags while delivering his strange monologue, and Monoma makes sure to keep an eye on the animal and listen to the villain. Then the villain shows something, and Monoma smirks. Instant regeneration, huh? He has fought immortals and creatures with extremely high regeneration rates. He knows how to destroy them. So he jumps forward and hears a loud roar coming from the water area. Monoma ignores it as he envelopes his tanto in fire. He cuts off the beast's arm and cauterizes the wound. As he expected, it doesn't grow back. What he doesn't expect is to fall towards the inky black portal that opens beneath his feet, sending him straight into a punch from the beast. He feels his ribs crack and then break and he is thrown flying. He hears his teacher scream his name and his white mask is torn off his face. Monoma lands in the water, blood dripping from his mouth into the liquid. He struggles because he can't abandon his teammates, even if the deep fatigue threatens to overwhelm him here and now. He refuses to let them die, and a healing quirk is implanted into his body to heal his ribs as best he can. He pulls himself out of the water to see the main villain reaching for Tsuyu, and the Noma holding Aizawa and him, both of them, activate the erasure and he rushes forward as fast as he can. The villain moves aside when Midoriya tries to attack him, and the creature takes his place. Monoma sees that Midoriya has done no harm, and knows that blunt force will not work on the creature. So he pulls out his other Tonto and stabs the Noma through the chest and tries to cauterize the wound. Noma disappeared before this, now he stands next to the main villain, and the doors to this place are breaking down. It's All Might, and Monoma realizes that the hero isn't smiling. He quickly fishes Midoriya and Tsuyu out of the water and jumps away, the clone separating from him, and he takes Eraserhead with him. He looks them over as he runs. Midoriya has a broken finger, but otherwise the kids are fine. His clone tells him that Aizawa is in bad shape and that he is in bad shape too, but he grits his teeth and keeps moving. He can hear loud explosions and battle cries, but he moves to send them to safety. Monoma leaves them near the exit doors and activates 2 quirks at once. He sees black spots in his field of vision, but wants them to disappear. He uses Yaoyorozu's quirk to make a splint for Midoriya and goes to work on Aizawa. A healing quirk that uses his own body fat like Yaoyorozu's and heals Aizawa as best as he can. He lays down the man's broken arm and tries to push his ribs back together. He treats his skull fracture and bandages his wounds. He puts together what the pink-haired student taught him and ignores the fatigue that makes him want to fall face first into the ground. He watches All Might and Nomu, how the hero takes him out. All Might has the advantage. Unlike Nomu, he has 2 arms, but he is a little weaker. Monoma knows that All Might will win, but he can't help but worry. Hirojiri then uses his quirk and Monoma moves again. He uses something he doesn't like to use, and the extreme quirk comes crashing down on Kurojiri with all its power. To everyone outside it seems like it's just a split second, but only Kurojiri sees the sky turn red and sees Monoma in front of him, sees the blonde crescent eye, and then his worst nightmares. The quirk that Monoma copied is the ice bending and freezing the Nomu. All Might manages to escape, and then the two get into a fight that leaves Monoma's head spinning. But even as the two continue to fight, Monoma looks at them and thinks, my weakest, stupidest student could beat you both. But the Nomu is gone and Midoriya jumps, and Monoma is half a blow behind, holding out his hand because he knows Midoriya's legs are broken and the heroes are already here. The bullets pass through the villain's hands and Monoma catches Midoriya. He sees All Might begin to change, what the hell, and the concrete walls rise up. Monoma sees All Might's true form, nods to the man, picks up Midoriya, and heads towards the entrance, rocking back and forth as he tries to heal Midoriya. Midoriya himself is looking over his shoulder at All Might, and Monoma knows he must be very concerned. He sets Midoriya down on one of the hospital's portable beds and sits down against the wall, swaying and falling. He closes his eyes and everything around him turns inky black. I'm so sorry, Naruto, sensei won't be late next time. 16, 17, 18, the one with the broken legs, where is the 20th? Who's missing? Asks the man in the coat, and all the students look at each other. Todoroki raises his hand with Yaoyorozu. Monoma Nito has disappeared. The man in the coat nods and tells the heroes that someone is missing. And the students look around worriedly. Present Mike finds Monoma leaning against the wall and takes him into the ambulance. The man listens to the medics fussing over the wounded man, places Monoma on the bed, looks at Aizawa with concern, and leaves. I will train with Jiraiya to become stronger. They say that the damage could have been worse, they say that someone performed field healing on him. Aizawa doesn't know who, but Midoriya later tells him that it was Monoma Nito. I'm now Tsunade's student. They tell him that his arms and legs will heal properly and his broken finger will be perfect. They ask him who put the finger back in and Izuku says it was Monoma. I would like to join the Embu again. They find a cracked mask and a tonto at the bottom of the water area. There are traces of blood on the mask. A red eye gleams behind the dog's mask. Monoma wakes up in an instant, and he finds that his breathing is the same as before. He hears whispers and feels hospital sheets underneath him. He opens his eyes slightly and sees Aizawa talking to Recovery Girl. The man is bandaged and looks tiredly at where Monoma is lying. Then he flinches when he realizes that Monoma is looking at him through closed eyelids. Half a second later, Aizawa is standing by his bed, helping him sit up. "Got any water?" Monoma wheezes and is quickly handed a cup of water. Sipping it slowly, he turns to Aizawa and asks, "How long?" Aizawa stares at him as Recovery Girl checks Monoma's vital signs. 2 weeks, tomorrow is the festival, he says, and Monoma nods. Aizawa then says that he will not be participating in the celebration, but will instead sit with him in the host's area. The next day he walks into the classroom and half the class is screaming and the other half is dropping whatever they are holding. Monoma's eye smiles as they fuss over him. Equals 4. We must go equals. Monoma Nito is 14 years old, and All Might asks to speak to him alone, and he's really tired. Although, honestly, who wouldn't be if you just came out of the medical bay? The peace symbol popped out from around the corner as Monoma walked down the hallway, heading towards the school exit. Monoma stared at the peace symbol for a minute, then sighed heavily. "Young Monoma, could you come and talk to me?" He nodded silently, following the noisy hero back to the school. Eventually, they found themselves in front of the principal's office, and All Might beckoned him inside. "Hello, Monoma-san, we need to talk to you for a bit," the Mouse Bear Hamster school principal beamed, gesturing for the student to sit down at his desk. The Almighty stood next to the director, his face grimly serious. "Young Monoma, we have one question to ask you. Please answer honestly." "I will answer to the best of my ability," Monoma said, his eyes focused on the two adults, although inside he was thinking that he would rather return to the dorm. "Are you in any way connected to a man named Suzuki Kanoni?" Monoma thought for a moment, considering the strange question, before nodding. "He is my great-great-great-great-grandfather on my father's side." "Why do you ask?" "Only because he is my sworn enemy, and you had a very similar quirk." "What?" S-rank mission, Yamada Formica's escort, completed by the Hound team. "Welcome to the UA Sports Festival." Monoma cringed slightly at the volume of the present mix sound, tapping his toes as he watched the students walk out of the large doors. Midnight, the nominal 18+ hero, will host the opening ceremony today. Rating 18+? Isn't this high school? The only person who would actually try to make a move on this hero would probably be that weird perverted Class B kid Monoma met. Seriously, who knew someone could be so perverted? Midnight cracked her whip and the crowd fell silent. And now, from the first years, with a speech from first place, let's give the floor to Bakugo Katsuki. Spiky hair seemed oddly subdued as he approached the podium before. "I'm going to be number 1. I'm going to become Hokage, believe me." An obstacle course as the first act, a 0-pointer that Monoma defeated earlier. A balancing rope on rocks, and a minefield. Watching Todoroki freeze the 0-pointers and send them almost collapsing onto the other participants, that was pretty cold of him, but other than that, it was pretty dangerous for the teens. The other students could have been hurt if Tetsu and Kurashima just met. Midoriya was in some trouble if you looked closely, but Kendo seemed to be fine. Her gymnastics lessons from him must have paid off, seeing as she ran effortlessly across the rope over the chasm. Bakugo and Todoroki were evenly matched, each running in lockstep over the cliffs. Now minefield sounded interesting. Real mines? He was still hoping that the mines would explode like an amateur-made classy explosive device. And the smoke was pinkish purple, like the one Naruto used when he was joking with someone. Midoriya seemed to be doing something interesting. What was he using that piece of metal for? At least watching Midoriya explode 30 feet above the ground was funny. When I looked at him, I saw who I could be. Human pyramids with dodgeball? Everyone formed teams, and at some point, Midoriya started crying. A lot, like really hard. The green-haired boy formed a team of Ochako, as well as Tsuyu and Tokoyami. Monoma was a little surprised that Ida didn't team up with Midoriya and Ochako. The blonde sighed before getting up from his chair and crawling to the back of the cockpit as President Mike yelled into the microphone. He paused for a second at the back wall of the stadium box before slipping out. Neither Mike nor Aizawa noticed him walk away, closing the door behind him. Monoma ran down the stairs, sighing and rubbing his temples. The noise was too much for his senses, and he took a much-needed break in the hallway. Hearing the sudden muffled roar of the crowd, Monoma sighed again. Basically, it's the Chunin exam, minus the flashier performances. And the point scores, he thought as he continued down the stairs. Scratching the bandage around his arm, the blonde moved silently through the corridors, eventually finding his way to the first floor. Turning the corner, Monoma stopped as another person entered the hallway. It was the pro hero, whom Copycat recognized immediately. Prospector. Continuing after a short pause, Monoma walked past the number 2 hero, his gaze directed forward, his gait as normal as he was barely paying attention to the fire user. Just when he thought he had escaped, the hero spoke. "Isn't this the one Shoto told me about?" the man growled, and Monoma stopped. The one who was so badly injured during the attack on the USJ that he couldn't get to the festival. It's quite possible. Monoma's voice was dispassionate, and his eyes were stony. "I don't know why you need to know this. It's none of your business. Don't you dare talk to me like that, boy." Monoma stands still, carefully not thinking about how much he would like to kill the number 2 hero, throwing the Senbon straight to the lethal point, as Genma taught him, not thinking about how annoying human interaction is. But instead, he turned and beamed as wide as he could, his eyes curved into crescent moons. He deliberately raised his voice and jumped up and down. He channeled his inner Gyro Naruto and stomped his feet sweetly. "Oh, forgive me. I shouldn't talk to heroes like that. But I can't help it, I do it every time I meet a living scumbag." He then turned around and walked away, rounding the bend in the hallway, and of course, crashed into the one and only Shoto Todoroki. "Well, hello, Todoroki-san," Monoma nodded to the other boy, "so far everything is going great." Ignoring the other boy's wide-eyed shock as he stared down the hallway, he probably heard Monoma calling his father a jerk. Monoma clapped Todoroki on the shoulder and walked away, humming some song Genma always hummed when they were on an easy mission. "Kakashi-senpai, we need him alive. It only says, whole." Honestly? He was almost certain that Midoriya and Todoroki's fight would lead to disaster, and who would have thought, that's what happened. After Aizawa dragged him back to the broadcast room, Monoma sat there for 30-odd minutes, waiting for something interesting to happen. Well, Todoroki, who created a glacier at the site of Siro's trap, was a little overboard. Midoriya breaking his fingers to get out of the purple-haired kid's quirk, mind control, was a little interesting. The pink-haired support student fooling around with Ida for 10 minutes was interesting, considering the number of weird inventions. Monoma wondered if he could entrust her with some other weapons than the standard ones he always had on his body, Tonto, Kunai, Shuriken. It was also quite interesting in perspective when he figured out how to make his paper butterflies explode the other day. And Tetsu and Kurashima arm wrestle? Fun. Unfortunately, Kendo gets knocked out of the round, and her opponent continues by running into Bakugo. But Midoriya and Todoroki? Because of the disaster, most likely even more than Bakugo and Midoriya. And he was right, seeing as Midoriya broke all the fingers on both hands, broke them again, broke his own hand, achieving a 3% punch to Todoroki's jaw, spurring Todoroki towards the fire and causing a giant explosion. A disaster, for sure. Monoma could make an even bigger explosion. Sakura could make a much bigger explosion using her bare fists. Was Sakura stronger than All Might? Yes. Bakugo quickly knocks out Tokoyami and battles Todoroki for first place. For some random reason, Todoroki refused to use his fire in the battle against Bakugo, causing the red and white boy to come in second. And funny enough, Bakugo had to be chained up to be given the medal for first place. Don't let him get above 2 tails, it's fraught with disaster. How did he get recommendations? He didn't even participate in the sports festival. Sighing as he looked through the short list he had somehow acquired, he had already chosen his hero agency. Why not try Staratel's agency? It would be fun to pester him. I'll bring Sasuke back. Hero names. It was extremely difficult to decide what he was going to choose. What should he choose? Maybe copycat or something similar? Copycat sounds pretty stupid, and hound doesn't really fit. What to do, what to do? Actually, something like Inari or Kitsune would be nice. They're kind of like him, shape-shifting and manipulative. Hubie might stand out a little more, and going by his real name would be a little weird. But he'd still want a dog or wolf-type name. Raijin, Inugami, Okami are pretty decent too. Okay, he's already decided what he'll do next. Monoma walks to the middle of the classroom and puts his board down with a light thud. A copycat hero, Okami. Okami? Midnight says it with the wrong accent, but considering it's a long-lost language that he's sure only he can speak fluently, it's a good try. Yes, the great wolf deity who guides you through the fog to reach your friend. Monoma is careful not to mention the second part, which says, or until your end. Tonto sings through the air. HM? Are you going to work for Staratel's agency too? Monoma leaned back in the subway, looking straight into Todoroki's face. I didn't think he would propose to me, considering I insulted him right to his face. Todoroki nodded slowly, still looking confused. Monoma thought to himself that he looked like a lost puppy. When the subway doors opened, Monoma followed Todoroki, and the other teenager led him to his father's agency. Honestly, was the agency supposed to be a giant skyscraper? No, but it was obvious that Prospector had made it so anyway. Entering the building itself elicited the same reaction as the outside, irritation and a collective sigh. Is your father really that loud? Midoriya's father is much more. Midoriya's father? Well, what? I'm 50% sure that All Might isn't Midoriya's father. And I am almost sure that he is the secret love child of the Almighty. Who put this idea into this poor teenager's head? Sighing again, Monoma headed straight for the reception desk. The heroes Todoroki Shoto and Monoma Nido are here for their internship. Okay, they were already waiting for you. Go up to the 27th floor, Prospector is waiting for you there. Thank you, Todoroki says before leading Monoma to the strange glass elevators. The awkward elevator music plays all around them, the floor numbers ticking up. When they get to the 27th floor, Monoma ducks, pulling Todoroki down with him as a wave of fire passes over their heads. When it stops, he jumps up, looks them straight in the eye, and says, "What the hell, sir?" Oddly enough, the madman smirks and sends another wave of fire at the couple. The Rasengan was never completed. Endeavor isn't a bad teacher, but he's not the best either. Monoma would say he was slightly better than human, considering he didn't beat up his students/trainees every day. Well, at least it's entertaining enough to watch Todoroki almost burn all of his father's documents. Patrolling was something familiar, he had done it before, when his mother was alive. Wandering around the neighborhoods, beating up the gangs and criminals that were hanging around, was it vigilantism, and keeping an eye on the area? A week into his internship at this place, everything familiarly spiraled into disaster. What looked like the strange monster he fought at USJ appeared out of nowhere, and Todoroki and him received a message from Midoriya that revealed nothing but his location. Todoroki left immediately, trying to shout after him, and Monoma followed him. They arrived at the right time. Todoroki sent a wave of fire that engulfed the man looming over Midoriya. Hero killer, Stain, huh? Monoma says, and a wave of ice erupts from his right foot. As the ice slams upward, Todoroki turns to give Monoma a look that screams something like, "You stole my move." Monoma shrugs, with some nonsense about to make the attitude back. Ida is lying on the ground, screaming at them, and the pro-hero is lying against the wall, the terrified look on his face eating up everything else. He hears Todoroki respond to something Ida is babbling about, and turns to just see Ida standing there stunned into silence. The hero killer Stain is still in the back of the alley, and Monoma rushes to meet him in combat, drawing his tanto to deflect the sword coming at him. Midoriya-san, what is his quirk? Some kind of paralyzing quirk. Midoriya yelled, and Monoma smiled as he saw Midoriya dive down with a fist harder than he had last seen. I guess it has something to do with the blood or something? Blood? Okay, he can work with that. He lunges forward, ducking under a stream of fire. Todoroki, letting his quirk fade, come back to life, and the crawling lines stain the other's jaw. Skin-to-skin contact. He turns sharply, slashes Spot across the cheek with the knife, and jumps back. Distract him for a minute or two, he shouts, and gets to work, searching for the new quirk he's acquired. When he gets a new quirk, he has to spend a few minutes analyzing it, otherwise it won't work to its best potential. Sure, you can copy the seals to a jutsu, but can you perform it? He can still hear the sounds of battle, feel the coolness and heat. Monoma can hear the crackling of electricity, the whooping of engines and screams. Something almost brushes his face, but his eyes are still closed. Clear! He yells, opening his eyes to see only Midoriya fallen bleeding onto the sidewalk of the alley, Stain attacking Todoroki, and Ida in a different place than before with a knife piercing his arm. Without hesitation, he picks up his kunai and licks the blade. It's disgusting, it tastes exactly like he remembers. Meanwhile, the Spot freezes and falls face down. Monoma trots up to the hero killer and quickly knocks him out, leaving Midoriya, pro-hero native, and Ida free to move on. Okay, he says, placing his hands on his hips. Who got hurt the most? Ida, Midoriya says, and Monoma makes a face. He'd done this before, saying that someone else had been hurt worse than him, causing him to pass out and bleed. It wasn't fun, and he had a hell of a headache when he woke up. No, Monoma says, Todoroki, can you bandage Stain while I treat them? He doesn't know much about healing, but he copied Recovery Girl's quirk, so it should work. He leaned down and quickly kissed Midoriya's forehead, making sure to heal him as much as he could without taking away too much stamina. He combines one quirk with another and it drains his energy too instead of just giving Midoriya a cure. He does the same with Ida, Todoroki, and the pro-hero. He sways slightly on his feet, bandaging the minor wounds that have never healed. Todoroki supports him as they limp out of the alley. Ida holds Stain, the hero killer slung over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Then something whizzed past, Monoma flinched, and Midoriya was kicked in the face. It was a short old man who was currently lecturing Midoriya so hard that even Todoroki was slightly gloomy. Prospector turns the corner as well, and when he spots them, his expression is unreadable. The other pro-heroes turn their heads, and Monoma almost lets himself relax. And then, Midoriya. His body moves on its own, and Kaminari's quirk glides through his system, getting his blood pumping. Darius' strength and speed enhancements are applied, and he moves. His mask slips into place, and instinct takes over. The hound gallops after the creature with Midoriya in its claws, leaping over rooftops and quickly catching up. He leaps high into the air, a crackling ball of electricity lighting up his mask. His Sharingan glows, and he screams in a forgotten language, long dead. Chidori. His hand plunges straight into the creature's heart, liquid splashing onto its face, and Midoriya falls from its clutches, only for another man to catch him and the knife finds its way into the creature's exposed brain. He's dead, and Hound jumps between Midoriya and the hero killer, who has somehow woken up and broken free of his bonds. His tanto is splattered red, his Sharingan spinning. Blood is running down his mask, and he's already calculating what he'll have to do to kill him. I won't let any of these fake heroes kill me. Stain screams, and he honestly doesn't care. The only one who can kill me is the All Might. There is a moment of silence, and Hound realizes that the hero killer has passed out. He sighs, sheaths his tanto, and turns to crouch next to Midoriya. Hey, he says, pushing his mask back onto his head. Any new injuries yet? His stamina isn't great, but there's enough there that he can heal Midoriya's wounds. He'll have to take a nap for a day or two, but he needs to make sure his and his comrades are okay. Midoriya sits up, Monoma helping the green-haired boy. The blonde leans down again, pressing a masked kiss to the other's forehead, and the wounds evaporate into thin air. Midoriya then has to help Monoma back up, the other leaning on the shorter one. Ida, Midoriya, Todoroki, and himself end up in the ambulance. Sighing, he leans back, not thinking about the blood covering his hands, and sleeps. Before he falls completely asleep, he feels someone covering him with something like a blanket. The sirens stop and he disappears. I'm going to kill you. I can't tell you how much I don't care. When he wakes up, Monoma keeps his breathing even and listens. The only thing he can hear is the beeping of the monitor. He is in a hospital room, he immediately makes plans to escape, and is very thirsty. He is dressed in a classic hospital gown, and someone has taken the trouble to put a hospital mask on him. There is a glass of water on the nightstand next to his bed. He looks around the room and sees Kendo and Tetsu sleeping next to his bed. He sees Midoriya, Todoroki, Ida sleeping in other hospital beds. Monoma smiles, drinks the water, pulls his mask down and leans back. As he falls asleep again, he thinks, I am Nido Monoma, I am almost 15 years old, and it seems I have new comrades. I hope I can protect them this time. == 5. Talk == His name was Monoma Nido. He was about to turn 15, and he was still tired. He felt more tired than before. After the whole mess with the stain killer was over, he almost laughed at Todoroki for almost calling the police officer ignorant. He was finally able to sleep on his own bed, in his dorm room. Making his way through the traps he had set, Monoma threw himself onto his bed with a sigh. He sat up and reached for his notebook and pencil. Opening the notebook, he found the names of the quirks and descriptions. He turned to a blank page before scribbling anything. Hero killer, stain, blood paralysis. Tasting blood can paralyze victims. Paralysis effects vary for each blood type, in order B, AB, A, and O. Energy cost C+. Prospector, hellfire, produce and manipulate fire at will. Side effects, reduced stamina, heat stroke, impaired physical function, energy expenditure A+. Pan, plant manipulation, side effects, dehydration, numbness of limbs, energy expenditure B-. Putting down the pencil, he threw the notebook aside. Monoma fell back, slightly hitting the bed. He always wrote down the quirks he copied. He could remember them all, but sometimes it was better to have paper copies. Monoma kept the notebooks under lock and key, and only showed the contents to one person. But that person died, so no one but him knows about the pages. Monoma collected 2 notebooks of quirks, each with a different strength and power, from the simplest to the most powerful. The All Might quirk was on the most powerful type, and the simple quirk of changing the color of the nails was on the bottom. He sighed and threw the pencil into the switch, plunging the room into darkness. Plan Delta, target position changed, 2 a.m. Okay, you want. Hatsum looked down at the notebook she was holding, a large, long, flat sword with 2 notches, one at the end a full circle, the other half, a semicircle. A bow staff, metal fans, a bunch of needles, and a chain staff. Oh, and a katana. Monoma nodded, also holding a notebook in his hand. Can you even use all of this? Well, he could, considering he was Guy's friend. Yes. She looked at him before nodding. I'll make them for you only if you demonstrate them and some other weapons. Deal. Hatsum and Monoma shook hands before parting ways, Hatsum hurrying to another area of the workshop and Monoma returning to class. Kakashi. My eternal rival. I challenge you to a fight. But what a twist. We'll use these fans. Okay, then the weapon is ready. Monum? What weapon? What weapon? Oh, he ordered a giant sword, a staff, several fans, many needles, another staff and a katana. I don't understand at all what you're talking about. How did you manage to break your thumb while doing Fuinjustu? Oh, I did pretty well, Monoma says, holding the paper in his hand. Kaminari leans over to look at his paper and just groans. Bro, you have 101. I could have gotten 103, Monoma stretches out on his desk, his classmates groaning around him. Hey, Monoma, bro, where did you get this scar? The question came out of nowhere, and to be honest, Monoma was taken aback when he heard it. He turned to look at Kurashima, who had asked the question. What scar? Well, the one on your eye. The one on his eye? As far as he was concerned, he hadn't suffered any injuries to his eye. Oh, that. Got into a fight with a rock. He wasn't wrong, but the scar was a birthmark, but he got the scar there, then, from the rock, and the rock crushed Obito, so he wasn't wrong. It just happened in another life. I'm pretty sure a stone can't leave a scar like that, Todoroki remarked dryly. Monoma shrugged, his eyes distorted. It was a sharp stone. The door slid open and Aizawa walked in, holding a sleeping bag under his arm. It's time for the practical exam, go and get your suits. The blonde stood up, grabbed his bag from under the table and moved along with the group of teenagers, each of whom was discussing what the exam would be like. A third-year student told me that these are robots. Robots? Again? Isn't using robots too expensive? It's UA, they can afford it. Sighing, Monoma quickly pulled on his uniform before looking into his locker. What kind of weapon should I bring? They said we could bring weapons. Monoma-san, why are you taking so long? Just go without me, I can handle it. If you say so. He sighed, scratching his head with his hand, not taking his eyes off the contents of his locker. Reaching out, he picked up the katana and sheathed it. It was a longer version. Longer than his torso and almost reaching his knees. Monoma had one when he was younger, and he remembered how many times his father laughed at him when the white-haired boy tripped over it. Throwing old memories out of his head, Monoma left the locker room and almost ran to where his classmates and teacher were waiting for him. Stopping in front of his teacher, Monoma smiled with his eyes. Sorry I'm late, there were stairs so I had to take the long way around, and then a black cat mysteriously appeared so I had to go out the window. Aizawa grumbled silently before herding them all onto the bus. The ride was filled with chatter, most wondering what their test would be. Monoma sat next to Todoroki, his katana leaning against the wall. After getting off the bus, they stood in line in front of the teachers. Aizawa also joined the line of teachers before starting. The test exercise is about to start, he said. Obviously you might fail, so if you want to go to summer camp, try your best not to disappoint. Harsh. You've heard rumors about the final exam, haven't you? I dare say you all have an idea of what an exam is. Robots, right? Just like the entrance exam. Kaminari exclaimed, and Ashido exclaimed too. Monoma watched the teacher, and suspicion appeared on his face. And then the director broke free from under Aizawa's scarf. While Nizu was babbling about how they were wrong and what the exam would be, Monoma blinked. During the exam, you will all form pairs and go against the teachers. What? Chunin exams round 2, find missing teammate. You will all be matched against one of the teachers, your grades, your fighting styles, your familiarity, all of it will be judged. We have all personally decided who you will be fighting, and now I will be listing the matches. Aizawa looked at them with a sly grin on his face. Monoma stared at him with slightly smiling eyes. He was using intimidation tactics. First of all, Todoroki and Yaoyorozu are together against me. Aizawa held up his scarf before continuing, Midoriya and Bakugo are All Might. Damn it, that's a bad team, Monoma sighed. He continued to wait and perked up when his name was called. Monoma and Kaminari, the two of you will go against Director Nizu. Kaminari was a good partner. Monoma looked back at the beaming boy who immediately jumped up to him. Hey, Monoma, the other blonde grinned, but his eyes showed nervousness, not from Monoma, but from the test. Sorry, but I'm your partner. You don't need to apologize, I think you'll be fine. Kaminari laughed, and behind that laugh there was a slightly suppressed echo. I'm almost sure I'll keep you. Oh, Kaminari reminded him of Naruto. They both suppressed what they really felt behind their smiles. Monoma had no idea how to deal with this. Of course you can do it, although he paused on the first word, the last words were spoken with complete confidence. I'll teach you a few things. I've tried, and I think you can do it. How good are your reflexes? Kakashi, you're such a burden. Okay, this is the stage where we'll fight, Nizu said, pointing to the arena-like factory. I'll explain everything to you. Kaminari shifted from one foot to the other, his hand going to his belt where Monoma had given him a kunai. He was nervous, but he allowed himself to hide his smile. He flinched slightly when a hand touched his shoulder, turning to look. Monoma smiled at the other blonde. Everything will be fine, just remember what I said, he whispered. The time limit is 30 minutes. In those 30 minutes, you must either put these handcuffs on me, Nizu held up a pair of high-tech handcuffs, or come outside. Fight or flight, Monoma muttered, looking straight ahead. This time, the exam will be like a real battle, Nizu beamed. So please act as if I were a real villain. In a real battle, you either fight the villain or run and call for backup, the principal said. This will test your judgment. Since we're real pro heroes, we had the choice to make compression weights, something to hold us back. Nizu picked up the metal cuff and began to put it on. Wow, the support did a good job with those, he chuckled. The clasps clicking. Okay, I'll be going somewhere else then. You two wait until the exam starts, and then you can move as you chose. Nizu waved goodbye and trotted off. Good luck. Kaminari watched the director go, and Monoma continued to look ahead. Soon, the sound system started working. Everything is in its place, right? We can beat him, right? Kaminari asked nervously, looking around. In that case, everyone get ready. Yes, we can, Monoma replied, reaching out to ruffle Kaminari's hair like he did with Naruto. In all honesty, the other teen reminded him of the Jinchuriki, and Monoma already felt himself becoming more and more brotherly towards his classmates. Let's start. Kaminari looked at him in surprise, his hands jerking upward, but he remained standing still. Wow. And just as they started, a ball crashed into the wall. Monoma grabbed Kaminari's hand and his quirk came to life. The blonde threw him aside and jumped to his feet. Principal Nizu laughed from the car as the ball continued to swing. Pulling out his katana, Monoma strengthened it before cutting the chain. The ball fell to the ground, shattering the surface. Monoma jumped back, and Kaminari quickly joined him. Okay, it's time for a test run. Let's get to the exit. Okay, Kaminari nodded before lighting up the electricity. Instead of it spreading around him, he focused, directing the energy to strengthen his muscles, and began to glow a solid yellow light. Remember to be careful, watch your levels and use your reflexes. Your thoughts may not keep up with your speed. Monum suddenly moved to the left, and a large weight fell from the ceiling. Let's get out of here. They moved quickly, occasionally running through the hallways. Monoma had to stop Kaminari from running into walls and other objects several times, but the distance they covered was extremely effective. Weaving through the twisting hallways, Monoma deflected blunted bullets with his kunai as he continued to move forward. Suddenly Monoma shouted, "Jump!" Kaminari quickly jumped up, and where they were standing, the floor crumbled, leaving a large hole that went to who knows where. Kaminari stared at the hole before Monoma pulled him away as they turned around. Nizu giggled again as he somehow rammed through the wall and Kaminari managed to short out the machine at the cost of losing his technique. Monoma continued to watch as the blonde began to gain strength again, and they were back in the lane. Soon the gates appeared, and they braked sharply. Okay, let's get out of here. Kaminari was about to run through the exit when Monoma stopped him. Wait, let me do something first. The blonde pulled out his senbon, turned around, and threw it into the crack in the wall. Immediately, Nizu, somehow, jumped out, and Monoma turned around and pushed Kaminari out. Team Monoma and Kaminari wins. Confetti blew out the sign, and Nizu trotted over to them. That was amazing, I didn't expect you to be so alert, Monoma-kun. He said cheerfully, congratulations, excellent grades. Let's go back, don't pretend I didn't see you get hit by a splinter, Kaminari-kun. Monoma-kun, your finger is broken, let's go. The pair shuffled onto the bus, and Monoma sighed, stepping back as the bus took them to the medic's room. == 6. Day by day == So, a trip to the mall? Monoma purred, not taking his eyes off the glowing screen of his wonderful phone. He was reading an amazing work, something you might know as porn, but let's not dwell on that. Yeah, to get supplies? Midoriya stood in front of the other boy, his words sounding like a more serious question. Can you repeat that? To get supplies? What? Supplies. Shopping center. What did you say? Supplies. Why didn't you say this before? Midoriya looked like he was about to smash Monoma into the sun, which was quite an interesting look for the timid green-haired teenager. Monoma laughed, putting his phone, with porn, down. Sure, why not, what time? This is a plant, Kakashi-sensei. Eh? Okay, let's split into groups to get supplies. What does everyone need? I need a foothold so I don't suddenly decide to throw myself off the cliff because Ika doesn't exist here and 50 Shades of Grey is decent but not the best. Oh, and bread too, is what Monoma could have said, but instead he just said, I need sunscreen. He really needed the sunscreen after throwing his last bottle at a particularly obnoxious kid from Class 1B. That kid was a huge asshole. Monoma might be a pervert, but he wasn't the type to come in the girls' locker room and grope said girls in class. At least Jiraiya knew how to control himself when it came to dangerous situations. It was a pleasant sight when he saw a child abandoned halfway across UA grounds when he was caught peeping at Kendo. Sneaking away from the group alone, Monoma headed towards a simple convenience store, collecting bottles of sunscreen. What's the difference between 30 plus and 80 plus? Does it still protect your skin? Why is one for 8 hours and this bottle for 2? Do I need waterproof sunscreen? How can sunscreen be waterproof? Wait, do I need bug spray? Is cream or spray better? Do I need one of those stick sunscreens? Finally choosing one, 70 plus, 6 hours and waterproof. Cream. Monoma walked out of the store, humming to himself as he walked around the mall. Konoha didn't have big malls like this, they weren't that developed in big buildings. The academy was smaller than this mall. But something was wrong. His insides twisted as the teenager walked around, and he was never wrong. Monoma looked around, his eyes flashing rapidly over their heads, trying to determine what had caused his senses to stir. And he saw them. The dry-ass bastard from the USJ attack sat next to Midoriya, his hand threateningly placed on the boy's neck. Oh, Monoma was exhausted. First the USJ attack, then the internship shit, and now this? The last time something happened in the order of gradual decline was with his students. The last Uchiha, a Jinchuriki, and a powerful monster. Then again, he wouldn't be surprised, because he was in a class with a totally not All Might son, explosive dude, and dual quirk. What was he supposed to expect? So, naturally, Monoma sighed, cracked his knuckles, stretched out his legs and jumped from the second floor. The teenager increased his muscles, pulled himself up with a flying twist, tilted his body in the same way, and hit the villain in the head. Sure, it could knock the man out, but Monoma wasn't the type of person to assume that someone was defeated when the enemy might wake up. Shigaraki's head went straight through the wall with a loud bang and the civilians around him scattered. There were cries of surprise, but they were easy to ignore. Monoma glared at the villain as he climbed out of the rubble, dusting off his pants. He turned around to check on Midoriya, making sure he was unharmed. Are you okay, Midoriya-san? You just hit the leader of the League of Villains on the head. So? Monoma reached out, pulling the mask even higher onto his face. He turned around sharply, feeling a surge of energy, and saw the tip of Shigaraki's foot disappear into the doorway. Damn. What the fuck? Naruto, what the fuck? Okay, get on the bus in order. Ida gestured with his hands as people entered the bus. We'll just go in, Ida, you don't need to tell us anything, Kaminari said before taking a seat on the bus. Monoma had already found his seat, leaning against the window to wind up and take a nap. Todoroki sank into the seat next to him, tapping something on his phone. Honestly, this boy reminded him of Sasuke at times. Sharp, probably traumatized, sometimes hot-tempered, the sunshine personified their side. The bus ride was fairly uneventful for Monoma, considering he dozed off before 10 minutes had even passed. His quirk had led him to take naps whenever he had free time. He had also gained the impressive ability to doze off while standing up, so it was fun. The hours passed quickly and the bus slowed down to stop at the side of the road. The blonde was jolted awake by Todoroki, who pushed him out of the bus. This is a rest stop, the fire and ice user explained, pushing Monoma, who was still blinking from the harsh sunlight, towards where the rest of their classmates had gathered. This doesn't look like much of a rest stop, Monoma grumbled, and the four figures began gesturing at the group. He squinted dimly before blinking very hard. It's interesting that it's not every day that you see a very handsome guy in a military uniform. Sighing, Monoma looked around, running his eyes over the trees, rocks, and earth. Where did the earth go? Monoma looked down and saw that he was already 100 feet above the ground. The deep forest lay before him, and the blond man flipped lightly in the air, landing on a tree. He seemed to disappear, naturally hidden in the shadows. His classmates continued to descend, and Monoma heard their cries as someone landed. But right now, his thoughts were not on his classmates, but on the trees in front of him. It was so nostalgic to be in the big forest, and Monoma felt very cheerful. The good old memories of racing through the forests of Konoha came back to him, and he chuckled slightly under his mask. The blonde moved forward slowly, taking a step along the branches. Then another, and another, faster and faster, until he was flying above the trees. The flower in his eye spun, but Monoma felt little exhaustion as he leaped through the greenery. He heard a scream, and some earthly creature reached out to him from the ground. Monoma just smiled, his irises swirling, and he launched a frankly huge and powerful water dragon, arching over the trees and crashing down. Even after stopping, he continued to walk forward, pushing off from each tree branch with powerful leaps. The trees floated past as if in a fog, and Monoma felt like he was back in the Konoha forest. He felt at home. A few minutes later, he landed gracefully, jumping out of the tree and sliding down to stop in front of Aizawa and the 4 other people he had seen earlier. "Done," he said cheerfully before leaning forward and passing out on the ground, much to Aizawa's delight and the confusion of the team of hero defenders. "What makes me happy? I guess a good run through the trees counts." A few hours later, the rest of Class A stumbled out of the forest, looking dead tired. Then all eyes fell on Copycat's unmoving face, and they all broke out in groans. A few minutes later, Midoriya was also on the ground. Because a small child was hitting him where the sun didn't shine. "Kakashi-sensei, isn't this guy bothering you?" "Actually, yes." "Help me." "Oh, nothing better than a good old hot spring to soak in at the end of the day." Kaminari laughed as he slid into the hot water. "Just make sure you don't sneeze and it'll be a perfect ending," Monoma said dryly, sinking deeper into the water. Bubbles rose where his mouth touched the water. "Monoma-san, are you still wearing your mask?" "Shoji-kun too?" Midoriya asked curiously, touching the water with his foot. "Yes, I don't want anyone to see my disfigured face," Shoji replied, splashing water with one hand. Monoma exhaled with a gurgle. "Also, I don't think anyone wants to see my huge crooked teeth." Todoroki glanced at Monoma's face. "I'm almost sure you're lying." Monoma laughed and a stream of water hit Todoroki in the face. "What, you want to see my huge airship lips?" Only 6 people, in both lives combined, had seen his face. 4 of them were dead, the other 2? Monoma didn't know how they were doing. The springs filled with a quiet murmur, and Monoma felt himself getting even more tired. But when he climbed out of the hot water, he noticed a purple color out of the corner of his eye. Turning around to look, the blonde winced when he realized who it was. Running to the side, Monoma picked up the bucket. Lightly weighing the bucket in his hand, he glanced over his shoulder. Turning around, he threw the bucket straight at the back of Class B's Minetta's head. And as soon as he threw the bucket, another object hit the pervert in the head. The boys and girls turned at the same time to see what the sound was. The girls saw a purple figure falling, the boys saw the pervert's legs disappearing behind the wall. Monoma also saw another dark-haired boy, Kota, also standing on top of the wall. His hand was stretched out in front of him, as the child was the one who threw the other blunt object. Monoma saw the boy glance at the girl from the side and then faint against the wall. The blonde easily moved forward and caught the boy. "I will take him to the heroes," said Monoma, turning away from the springs. "Naruto, why did you put rubber chickens under the couch? Tenzo practically destroyed it." Monoma sighed as he looked at the roof and leaned back on his futon. Around him, he could hear the quiet whispers of his classmates and the rustling of people getting ready for bed. Overall, it was quite peaceful. He couldn't fall asleep. It was a habit that had somehow carried over from his past life, where he had not been able to sleep well for long periods of time. But he was also afraid that he would have nightmares. When people receive something they don't like or do something they don't like, their natural process is to either ignore it, avoid it, or confront it. You can neither face nightmares nor ignore them, so the only thing you can do is avoid them. But ultimately, avoiding them will only make you more tired. Then you'll have to face it all over again. Nightmares are not easy to shake off, and Monoma knows it. Nightmares of losing new comrades in this life and those of the past. He's doing it again, and he knows it. He's somehow pushing away those he cares about, but also unconsciously. Kendo and Tetsu barely talk to him, and he hasn't made a single noteworthy friend in his class. Sure, he might consider Todoroki, Midoriya, and Ida his friends, but they're not that close. He knows that Todoroki's family situation is bad, Midoriya cries a lot and records them, and is related to All Might, and Ida is from a pro-hero family, but that's all he knows. Personality is easy to understand, but friendship is not. Monoma sighs again and rolls onto his side. He can't sleep. == 7. I disappear == Monoma exhaled sharply, stretching his arms above his head. His knuckles made a few pops as he shook his hands. He ruffled his hair with one hand, turning to go back into the room. Stepping around the other students sprawled on the floor, he ducked into the bathroom, opening the door quietly so as not to wake any light sleepers. He glanced at the pile of bags scattered throughout the bathroom before finding his, neatly placed in the corner where he had left it. Monoma turned on the tap and splashed cold water on his face. He winced, wiping his face with a towel before pulling on his mask. The blonde sighed, running his fingers through his hair. It was still strange to see a color that reminded him more of Minato, as opposed to the silvery white he had back then. He returned to the large room, found his futon, and sat down again. The other students began to show signs of restlessness, and more restlessness echoed around the room. Monoma's eyes scanned the room, lightly tapping his toe against his leg in a mindless rhythm. Half the boys were sprawled on top of each other, and Kaminari practically kicked Zero in the face from where he was lying and snoring. He caught a movement out of the corner of his eye. Turning his attention to the moving figure, Monoma nodded to Todoroki, who had just sat down. The red and white teenager rubbed his sleepy eyes and blinked at Monoma. The younger Todoroki nodded in response, quickly getting up from his futon and heading to the bathroom. Monoma sighed, remaining calm and wary. Mornings with teenagers were always long. Get up and attack my students, the soaking wet Gennin's cries were always pleasant to hear. We're practicing now, Aizawa said, standing in front of the students. They all huddled around him, staring at the teacher with wide eyes. Bakugo, your last score for throwing the ball was about 700 meters, right? Take this ball and throw it again. Bakugo chuckled, snatching the ball from Aizawa's hands. Explosions erupted from his hands as he launched the ball into the air, sending it flying over the forest. His scream of "die" rang through the air again, echoing through the mountains. It was only a little further than his previous count. Monoma looked towards the forest, half listening to Aizawa continue his speech, half watching the bird in the tree with half an eye. Glancing to the side, he sees the other pro-heroes crowding around. Probably going to help them train with their quirks. Okay, you're free, the Wildcats will tell you where to go, and, Monoma, come here for a moment. Monoma blinked, then nodded his head and stepped forward. The teenager stood in front of Aizawa, ignoring the other students who were beginning to disperse to their seats. You said your quirk drains your energy, right? The pro-hero asked. Too much overuse will cause you to go into a coma? Yeah, Monoma drawled, looking back at Todoroki. The other teens seemed to be climbing into the vat, a fire blazing below. Overuse means coma, I was in a coma for 2 weeks tops. Aizawa sighed, scratching the back of his head. Your combat skills are on par, above your class level, the teacher nodded thoughtfully. And what is your strongest quirk? Aizawa leaned forward, his quirk not activated, but Monoma could still see the red glint in the man's eyes. The one that costs you the most energy loss. Monoma blinked before going through his mental files. Well, there was All Might's quirk, which he couldn't control freely past 32% without expending some core energy. He'd only gone up 2%, a slight blow to his ego. Endeavor's quirk was that he could produce flames at 3000 degrees, like his classmate, but could only keep it burning for 5 minutes before black spots began to fill his vision and he became drugged. Kaminari's quirk, one of the most powerful electrical quirks Monoma had ever laid eyes on, could push him up to 2 million volts before he would short out and shut down. But the most powerful quirk he'd ever touched. It was hard to say, considering so many people here had powers that would be considered gods on Kagaya's level, or at the Jinchuriki level. Look at All Might. Monoma frowned, still rummaging through his mental files. I don't really know, he frowned to himself, still turning page after page. The memory quirk was really quite useful right now. Creation quirk, growth quirk, light quirk, plant quirk, fire wings quirk. That's exactly what I want you to find out. Aizawa reached out and ruffled his hair. Monoma blinked in surprise, subconsciously reaching up. The last time someone ruffled his hair like that was Jiraiya. Understood. Be careful when you get tired, Aizawa warned him. If I see you swinging, you'll rest for 4 hours. Monom laughed dryly and put his hands in his pockets. Sorry, Aizawa-sensei. Exhaustion is a given for me. Wait until I look like I'm about to faint, or if I actually stop. That's how you'll know I'm at my limit. Aizawa sighed. Okay. Today you'll be trying to find your strongest quirk, write down your top 3. Tomorrow you'll probably be doing endurance training with Tiger. Monoma nodded and headed towards the empty clearing. He needed a lot of space for the experiments he was going to try and carry out. First he closed his eyes, going through his mental files as he searched and searched for energy levels that would make him fall over on the spot. The first quirk that popped up was obviously All Might's quirk. He had practiced with it enough, he knew how it worked. A prospector's whim, I've had to use it sometimes. Okay, this next one was pretty powerful in a way. He copied it from a retired pro hero, shrugged it off, and activated his quirk when he saw the chance. Monoma extended his hand, and the flowers in his eyes began to swirl. He concentrated, and winced slightly as even activating his quirk stole some of his stamina. Monoma extended his hand forward, and a strong wind swept through the area. Monoma nodded, feeling the sand and looking at the small amount of destruction the quirk had caused to the surroundings. Some trees had been uprooted, rocks were scattered here and there. He hadn't used the quirk at its highest level, knowing that if he had, he would likely have gotten hurt. He conducted research on the retired pro hero by digging up old videos filmed on YouTube. The quirk would have formed impenetrable clouds in the sky at full power, and a tornado would have descended upon the powerful villain. There was a reason the hero had retired. Not just because of the villain, but because of the backlash for forming that tornado. Monoma took a slow breath as he turned around. Using the wind meant he would be breathing less air, making his lungs worse. This retired hero had lung cancer, as well as a host of other health-related ailments. The quirks were dangerous, anyone could tell you that. They were dangerous not only for those around you, but also for yourself. Midoriya broke bones every time he used All Might's quirk. The Almighty himself coughed up blood every time he came out of transformation. Aizawa had permanent damage to his left eye, although the organ was healing. Monoma sighed, raised his head and stared at the wandering clouds. He had no more time to think. He raised his hands to the sky and saw ripples of scales running across them. Wow, Kakashi-sensei, you're only an hour late. Monoma felt the fatigue in his molecular cells, and it really showed how tired he was. The blonde groaned, falling to the ground. It was fine, but he wanted to test one more quirk. From the ground. On his face. Yes. Monoma raised his head and extended his hand before the flower in his eyes came to life. He immediately slapped his palm on the ground. Crystals rained down from the ground in front of him, stretching upwards towards the sun. They shimmered and shimmered, but Monoma didn't care. He was completely exhausted, allowing himself to fall back with a slight groan. He felt like that time he overused his Sharingan, again, and fell, again, and Sakura greeted him with her prostrate body, again. Monoma paused before returning to his fast-paced thoughts. He really should stop zoning out so often. Monoma sighed into the dirt, wincing slightly as hands slid under his arms and lifted him into the air, much like his genin had when they caught Toru. Aizawa told me to take you to the picnic benches, Todoroki's monotone voice was heard. The taller teen, only by 6 inches, strode back to the designated bench, throwing Monoma over his shoulder. Why did you pick me up like a cat? You remind me of one of them. Monom had to pause. My hero name is the name of a spirit that looks like a wolf. I have a wolf mask as part of my costume. Is this the wolf? Monum groaned, wincing as he was seated on a wooden bench. "Oh, my bones." Todoroki shrugged, returning to his training. Monoma watched him go, digging in the dirt. Todoroki had one of the most powerful elemental quirks, being able to bring a firestorm or glacier to life with a wave of his hand. To be honest, the glacier from the sports stadium was breathtaking, but also very unnecessary to beat only Zero. Monoma slightly wondered why Todoroki did not use such an attack in the disaster that was the USJ. He grumbled as he watched Frost set the table. Oh, sure, he was exhausted. The only thing that stopped him was when he was lying on the ground and couldn't even move a muscle. "You're overtired yourself," Aizawa sighed and sat down with a thud. He brushed the frost off the table. "How bad is it?" "If I fell asleep right now," Monoma replied, mentally and physically assessing himself. Mentally he was exhausted and felt a little guilty as he worked his way through his consciousness. Physically, it was even worse. His fingers were shaking, and there were various wounds scattered all over his body. Monoma was 80% sure that there was a rock lodged in his palm. "If I fell asleep right now, I'd be out for a week," he thought, relaying his prospects to the teacher. "It's like after Spot's attack." Aizawa grumbled, standing up. "Calm down, problem child." Monoma mumbled something in response, falling onto the table. Half of the table was still covered in frost, so he enjoyed the slight coolness he felt. Oh, he forgot about all the quirk backlashes that were about to kick his ass in an instant. "Kakashi-sensei. Behind you." A test of courage. Monoma sighed, risking a longing glance at his futon, now back in its relatively comfortable home. It was already their third night at the summer camp, and each day the events were becoming more tiring and tiresome than the day before. It was the calculation of the exam day. Monoma had never wanted to see another math question in his life. He regretted that he had advanced in math. The only thing he really needed to know about math was how hard he had to throw a kunai to kill a man at a distance of 73 meters under the cover of branches with a wind speed of 2 meters per second and a height difference of 60 meters on his side. He blinked as Aizawa dragged Kaminari, Mina, Kirishima, Sato, and Zero along with him. Even though Kaminari had passed the physical test, he had almost spectacularly failed the written exams. "Class B will be the first to scare," one of the pussycats explained. "Class A will go through the forest in groups of 2, one team every 3 minutes. You'll find a name with a map in the middle, take yours and return to base." Monum grumbled, leaning back on his heels and looking at the sky. "There will be no active contact between the scarecrows and the victim. There will only be quirks that will allow them to scare you as best they can. So be creative. Whichever class makes the other one wet their pants, they will win." Monoma smirked from behind his mask. Wait until Class B had their own test of courage through the forest. He knew tons of convenient illusionary quirks that could make Japanese nightmares. A woman who stands in a foggy clearing but disappears the second you turn away, and when you look back at the road, she's there. It was a great trick, no matter how many times he repeated one of them with his genin. Naruto hated ghosts. "Wait, groups of 2? There's an odd number of us here," Midoriya frowned in confusion. "That leaves one extra." Midoriya was unperturbed, being the only one singled out on his own. "And he was paired with Bakugo." As if that was any better. Monoma stood dumbly next to the prickly blonde, who scowled at him. "Why should I be with this bastard copyright?" Monoma rolled his eyes. This wasn't the first time he heard traces of his old nickname in this strange world. It made sense considering his quirk. "I'm asking as if I'm any happier," he clarified calmly. Monoma walked down the narrow path, Bakugo angrily stomping behind him. Both teenagers were already scared, but neither of them showed a strong reaction. Suddenly, someone's head popped out of the ground. Monoma winced, barely stopping himself from kicking the girl in the face. His foot was right next to her temple, and she stared at him in shock. "What, excuse me," he offered before quickly walking away. Bakugo laughed after him, as rude and sloppy as always. For such a bad boy, oddly enough, Bakugo was a big follower of the rules. Monoma paused, frowning at the smoke he saw before him. He sniffed it carefully before covering his nose with his hand. "Bakugo. Don't inhale the smoke, it's knockout gas." The flower in Monoma's eye glowed ominously in the dark night as the wind began to blow the gas away from them. The teenager already knew what was happening. The hound stirs where it was hidden and rises to the defense. With it, a new creature rises. It could be called Okami. Equals 8. We get along great with each other. The hound peered through the trees, clutching the knife he kept hidden under his shirt. The teenager was wary, the pattern in his eyes already blazing with hostility. In a 20-meter radius around them, the wind was blowing the poisonous gas away. He was exhausted, but not to the point of collapse, so he continued with grim determination and a steely gaze. These villains were hunting something, maybe even one of them. He clutched his face, searching for the white oval object that wasn't there. The hound existed to kill, to destroy. That type of action wasn't allowed in the world he currently lived in, the way of the shinobi, a stark contrast to the image of a hero. He comes across another teenager fallen in the mud, unconscious from the poisonous gas covering the forest. The hound himself might be immune to it, but with Bakugo, he would rather drain his energy than let his classmate get infected and drag his unconscious body away. He bends down, dragging the Class B teenager onto his back. The hound knew he was not alone in his thoughts. 4 types of personalities in his mind, 4 masks to say. Kakashi, for my children, for my family, to laugh, to relax and to love. Monoma, for detached, calm, repulsive but still there. He won't let himself get close enough to care or be cared for. Hound, to attack, kill, tear apart. Of the days when he would sneak into houses to slit people's throats. Okami, to protect, to contain. Hero, traits taken from the genin he knew and loved. Okami wasn't there now, none of the other masks were fit for this moment. He needed laser-like focus and killing intent. It was just him, Bakugo, and the knocked-out teenager. The hound needed to defend and attack, something he could remember from his commands like his own skin. Something rustled in the tree branches, and it was not an animal. As soon as whatever it is emerges from the bushes, the gas begins to recede and disappear. Someone has beaten up the bad guy who produces the knockout gas, making his job much easier. The hound no longer paid attention to the dying gas. Before him was a villain. Whoever this villain was, he was probably no longer human. He groaned, gritting his teeth, and staggered in the moonlight. He leaned over the severed arm. It was Shoji's arm, wasn't it, practically caressing the flesh. Monoma knows him. Moonfish, he mutters before pulling the light from his skin. The creation of the quirk is difficult to handle and has consequences, but it is worth every delicate use. His energy is falling, and Hound knows it will fall further because of what he is about to do. The teenager he's carrying will be in danger for the next few minutes, so Hound taps him with his glowing hand. The teenager vanishes, along with much of his energy. But it's worth it, and the teenager returns to the main camp. Only Hound can barely keep himself from staggering through sheer willpower. Black spots flicker before his eyes, and he feels fatigue creeping up on his body. Bakugo growls, sparks already flying from behind him. What the hell is this? A very dangerous villain, he replies, his eyes flashing. Hound tightens his grip on the tanto, his fingers digging into the hilt. Hound could tear him apart in a few blows, but with Bakugo here, he must be careful. He takes a deep breath and watches the leaf fall. Something telepathic rings in his head and he recognizes what the main goal of these villains was. Apparently, they had their eyes on Bakugo and himself. He has the right to attack. He's moving. The hound rushes up the tree, ignoring the loud rustling of the leaves, and rushes at the villain. Already, strange teeth are lashing out at him, trying to attack and strike. They look sharp, but still jagged and yellowed. Moonfish growls through his strange gag, and more teeth lash out at his face. With one precise swing, the hound snaps a tooth, ducking under another that shoots out to knock his head off his shoulders. The tooth is hard, and from the look of it, his tanto is nearly shattered. He doesn't have enough energy to make another one, so he better be careful. Teeth tear through the forest, but Hound is already leaping forward and closing in on the strange villain. Ice rises from the ground and slashes upward, aiming for Moonfish. Light blue shimmers in the moonlight as Hound lunges up the ice and just misses Moonfish with his spear of fire. The hound curls into a ball, hitting the forest floor and springing back up ready. Bakugo roars towards the trees, screaming die. His quirk misses but hits Moonfish with a shockwave. The ash blonde lands next to him, growling under his breath. Moonfish growls at them, drool dripping from his mouth as he walks over the trees, his teeth like stilts. The hound still lies on the ground as it twists between his teeth. The sounds of sharp blades echoing in his ears, he can barely remember the war. He attaches Tetsu's quirk to his skin as he jumps upward, grabbing and rising higher. Until he is level with Moonfish, looking at the villain with traces of anger. From afar, he hears the sounds of falling trees and screams. The wind blows through his hair and the moonlight falls on his face, making his eyes, Sharingan, even more menacing. Hound smiles, his mask gone where it was torn off by those teeth. He smiles with childish innocence before lifting his leg and kicking Moonfish in the face. The shockwave from the attack sends Moonfish sprawling to the forest floor, and if that doesn't knock him out, the next kick will. The hound begins to fall back to the ground before he begins to spin and build up more momentum. He comes out at the last second and hits the villain in the gut with a momentum-boosted kick. The ground cracks and Monoma jumps back down to the still ground. The sound of falling trees grows louder and a black shadow covers the moon. Give me some light. It's Midoriya and Shoji, rushing towards them with a black shadow right behind them. The black shadow roars and with a swipe of its claws, it shatters the ground and sends the soil and trees flying. Monoma steps forward, ignoring the lethargy that envelopes him. Todoroki's quirk, where is it, blooms from his hand, and the dark shadow is pulled back. Bakugo's explosions light up the night with their flames, and all too quickly, everything falls silent. Shoji. Tokoyami's voice is low and hoarse, and he looks at the ground. I'm so sorry. When your hand was torn off, I got furious. I'm a little low on courage now. Monoma saw the tension in Tokoyami's eyes and knew the teenager was using up energy to hold the shadow in his back. After all, he hurt you, and this night only spurred him on. Save it for later, I knew you'd say that, Tokoyami reassured Shoji. Monoma approached Shoji, frowning at Midoriya's state. What happened to you? Midoriya opened his mouth, but Monoma shook his head. Save it for later. Monoma dropped the tanto into his palm before placing his hands on Midoriya's bruised and broken arms. His hands glowed a dull green, the bruises starting to lose their purple hue. Save your strength, Monoma-san, Midoriya frowned. Shoji looked back, raising an eyebrow. Monoma kept his hands still and steady, his eyes focused. His vision was all black spots, but he had more than enough practice to keep himself upright. You need your strength, Midoriya. They're after Monoma and Bakugo, right? Shoji stood still, allowing Monoma to heal Midoriya. Monoma and Bakugo? Why? Tokoyami blinked, rising to his feet. Who knows, right now our goal should be to return to the camp where the pro-heroes are, Shoji reasoned logically. We have to be careful when returning back, the villains could be anywhere at any second. Midoriya, your arms are healed, don't overuse them, the bones are fragile, avoid using them at all. Your ribs are also fragile, and you'll be covered in bruises. That's the best I can do for now. Any other injuries? You've done more than enough. Midoriya exclaimed, blinking. Shoji, you can let me go now, I guess. Monoma smiles, covering his face with his hands. Midoriya turns to him before turning away. Ah, your face. It's okay, it doesn't matter now. Monoma removes his hand from his face, hiding his trembling hands in his pants. Let's go back to camp. Right. Shoji, you'll go head on. Use your hands to feel the movements. Midoriya, you'll be in the back. Tokoyami, you'll cover us on the left. Bakugo, you'll be on the right flank. Midoriya, keep an eye on Bakugo, you too, Tokoyami. I'll be up front with Shoji, Monoma commanded, looking around at the assembled group. I don't care what you say, you copycat bastard, Bakugo grumbled, but nevertheless took his stance. This lineup could give everyone a mighty fight, Midoriya smiled, and Bakugo grumbled. Let's get out of here, Monoma waved his hand, tightly clutching his tanto in his hands. They moved quickly, and as quietly as they could. Monoma couldn't afford to use his sensor quirk, so he'd just have to trust Shoji better to feel. Even as he moved, black spots flashed before his eyes, and his legs shook. He wasn't going to get up anytime soon after that. Making his way through the trees, Midoriya gasped. Uraraka? Of course, it was their classmate. She was pinning another girl to the ground, stabbing her in the leg with a large needle-like weapon. With a quick movement, the villain left the ground and darted toward the trees. There are too many people here right now, she chirped, turning to stare at them again. I don't want to die, bye-bye. Suddenly, visible surprise, shock, and a slightly hidden feeling of something else crossed her face. She looked at their group, no, she looked at Midoriya. Before she disappeared into the greenery, her face broke into a smile. Who was that girl? Midoriya stepped forward, approaching the girls. Monoma followed him half a step behind, already lowering his tanto down. Monoma dropped to his knees, clutching his stab wound. His energy was draining with each passing minute, but he would not abandon his classmates, teammates, he would die before that happened. Monoma-san, your mask. Uraraka was surprised, her eyes turning away from his naked face. It's okay, there are more important things to do right now, he sighed again, already used to this reaction. It was strange to feel the wind on his face. He would just have to deal with it later. I'm glad you're relatively okay, Midoriya sighed, rubbing his face. You should come with us, we're guarding Kaken and heading back to camp. Bakugo? Uraraka frowned, where is he? What do you mean? He's coming right behind Midoriya, Shoji, and Monoma turned to look back. Tokoemi and Bakugo had disappeared, leaving only an empty, muddy path behind them. In the blink of an eye, Monoma was on his feet, and the tanto was thrown back into his arms. His eyes scanned the trees before settling on something. Found it. I got him, you know, said a man, wearing a mask and strange clothes. He had a cane and was holding something in his hand. He's not a hero resource, more of a villain, we're going to make him shine. Give it back. Midoriya demanded, and green electricity sparked around him. Careful, Midoriya, your bones. Monoma hissed, his eyes lighting up from using his quirk. He almost staggered, but he didn't lower his head. So you're saying, bring him back? The villain mocked, condescendingly and coldly. Bakugo doesn't belong to anyone, he's his own boss, you're selfish, he turned to Monome, tilting his head to the side. Now, I may not have gotten to you, but we will. Our boss wants to talk to you for a bit. Fuck you. Monoma shouted, stamping his foot. A tree grew out of the ground, quickly moving upward to attack the villain. He easily dodged it, darting above the trees. Those two were standing behind, Shoji hissed. He took them without making a sound? Well, I'm an artist in every sense of the word, the villain's voice had a mocking laugh that made the entire group bristle. You know, Moonfish was a serial killer. Your friend took him out with one blow, that's impressive. Monoma frowned before waving his hand, the ice spreading. It was less than what he could usually draw from Todoroki's quirk, but it was all he could work with. His stamina, his energy, was at rock bottom. The only thing he could use right now without going catatonic was his own life force. It was his last energy reserve, and each use took a chunk out of his life. To him, it would be worth it if he could protect his teammates, something he had failed at so many times. This was his second chance at life, but how he longed to see those he had missed. The pain that shot through his body was similar to the 3 days he spent trapped in Itachi's illusion. Tokoemi's hero name was funny enough. He needed to stand, and Okami needed to protect. In addition, every time his disciples activated their sage modes or seals, they would cut down their own life force. It seemed like his life force was about to slip down as well. Target 1 secured, the villain intoned as he flew over the trees. Proceed to the extraction point, Delta operations in effect. What? Midoriya gritted his teeth and jumped forward with a scream. He swung his arm to hit the villain but missed, falling back to the ground where Shoji caught him. Now that you've realized you've lost, the villain chided him, there's no point in throwing a tantrum. The villain turned away from them before storming off. Damn, he's really fast. Midoriya growled, quickly turning to Uraraka. Uraraka. Make us swim, Tsuyu, can you throw us really hard? Shoji, you can correct our course with your hands. Monoma, you have to hit me hard when we catch up. Wonderful. Uraraka's face showed surprise before she crashed into the group of boys. Like human cannonballs, huh? With a quick movement, Tsuyu wrapped her tongue around the three boys. Are you ready? She croaked before turning around. Monoma found himself flying through the air before he could see anything, and there were quiet screams coming from Midoriya and Shoji. The wind reopened the cuts in his skin from where they had curled up. It hurt. Monoma gritted his teeth through it. And it wasn't any worse than he had felt before. Soon they were very close to the villain. Electricity flashed around Midoriya, and he punched him before they could all fall on the man. The ground shattered at their landing spot, and Monoma looked up only to see the wide-eyed faces of the other three villains. Ho! One of them purred, looking straight at him. Mr. Compress. The blue flame spread right towards them. Monoma gritted his teeth and dragged Midoriya away. Shoji managed to get away in time, but they were all scorched. Several people from Shigaraki's hit list. Monoma heard a voice behind him. And you're one of them, huh? Monoma turned around abruptly, and the white electricity burst forth with a loud crack. The villain took the blow, tumbling heels into the bushes. All too soon, the villain was back on his feet. Monoma exhaled, swaying on his feet. His next step was like lead, and the wave of ice that followed was small. Are we tired or something? The villain asked, turning around. It's time for you to run. Shoji suddenly shouted, and Monoma flinched at the unexpected cry. You were holding something in your hands, weren't you, artist? I'm almost certain that was Bakugo and Tokoyami. Shoji. Midoriya cried out, blood running down his face. Great, then we're done here. Monoma exclaimed, turning sharply and running away from the villain. Monoma moved quickly along with Midoriya and Shoji before coming to a stop. A black fog hung over them, casting a shadow over the entire group. Foggy guy. Midoriya whispered, shock reflected on his face. All the villains dropped their greetings before disappearing into the void. But we still have hostages. This is why the villain from the past laughed. Good party trick, he said, removing his mask to reveal two marbles tucked behind his tongue. Anger distorted Midoriya's face as the marbles that Shoji was holding turned into wood after being attacked by Monoma. And here I say goodbye to you. Just when the villain was about to disappear behind the portal, from which there were 2 steps left to Monoma, the laser cut through the greenery and hit the villain right in the face. Why did the balls fly into the air? Monoma, Shoji, and Midoriya all flew forward, reaching out their hands to the balloons. Monoma saw a scarred hand emerge from the portal. Monoma punched the marble, sending it flying towards Midoriya, who fell from Bakugo? Tokoyami? A scarred hand grabbed him and pulled him inside. Monoma saw his classmates, teammates? Friends. For the last time, there was horror crossing their faces before black spots finally blocked out all of his vision. Monoma Nito is 15 years old and is in the hands of the League of Villains. Comment to 8. We get along great with each other. I'm not sure what exactly the League has the balls to do with him, but I'm sure that Aizawa will go gray faster with a student like that than with anyone else. And no one knows yet that he's wasting his life instead of energy. And yes, this is the last chapter for now, let's go our separate ways. == 9. Portal == Comment to 9. Portal. As a reader, I say we've clearly missed something somewhere. As a translator, why the hell did the style change? The first thing Nito does after being pulled through the portal is flail around and kick whoever pulled him through. Exhaustion is dragging his limbs down and his vision is slowly fading. Bakugo growls to his right, and the familiar sounds of his explosions keep Nito relatively alert. The ash blonde struggles before a well-timed flash following the heat pushes the villain back and brings Bakugo closer. The blonde teen taps his foot on the wooden floor, sending a spiral of ice around them, causing the villains to back away from the pair. Bakugo steps closer to him, a growl appearing on his face as he tenses his arms. A black-haired villain steps forward, blue flames casting shadows across the room, dancing on his hand. I advise you to step aside before we have to force you, he threatens, his face dappled with paper clips, his posture and movements strangely familiar. "Like hell we're going down without a fight, you fried bastard," Bakugo growls, raising his hand. Nito can see how his hands are shaking slightly, tired from how many explosions he's fired, and how pale the ash blonde has become. Neither of them are in any shape to fight, but neither of them wants to go down without a fight. Nito breathes in and out, ignoring the spots dancing before his eyes. "So be it," the black-haired villain shrugs before the ice disappears in a blue flash and Nito instinctively moves forward. Nito instantly targets the man with the blue flames, ducking as low as he can to knock the other down. The villain dodges at the last second, his eyes widening slightly as he retreats. Nito feels his headache intensify, the familiar burn keeping his mind on alert. The blonde follows the momentum of his swing, rising to his feet as fast as the wind to throw a right punch. It connects with the man's shoulder, sending him flying across the room with a crash. Bakugo's explosions light up the room as he attacks the girl with the knife, barely dodging the rapid slashes she makes at him. Nito moves in to help, but ends up jumping back to avoid the marble man's blows, his wounds complaining the entire way. "You're rather exhausted, aren't you?" he snorts, lowering his top hat and looking at Nito mockingly. He speaks like an artist, and Nito is in no mood to act. He's surrounded, with Fire Guy staggering to his feet on the left, Marble Man in front, Reki sneaking around on the right, probably thinking he's sneaking, he's not, and Portal Man standing behind the counter. There's no way out unless Nito plans to break through the roof, which is unwise considering Nito can just eat dirt and rock if they're underground. The sound of a knife whistles through the air as Bakugo jumps back, fighting the knife girl. She's fast, and it doesn't help Bakugo when the lizard boy moves in to join in. Nito growls, a guttural sound deep in his throat, before he lunges forward. The blonde ducks under the outstretched arms, his elbow flying up to connect with a loud crack on his wrist, the curb stomping the marble man on his kneecap. Nito, ignoring the scream of pain, rushes towards Bakugo, grabbing the knife-wielding girl by the hand and throwing it into Reki, who ran after him with 5 fingers spread out. Splashes of blue fire fly over their heads, Nito pulling them both down at the last moment. The heat feels cold, and it turns their skin a purulent red. His vision fades as he breathes heavily, raggedly. Bakugo huffs too, his hands turning red as his quirk wears away the skin. The blisters make it even more painful, sending waves of pain up his arms as he flexes them. Nito touches his elbow to Bakugo's, activating his telepathic quirk, copied from a little girl who bumped into him on the side of the road. She whispered an apology into his mind before running down the street again, laughing, chasing after her friends. Exhaustion drags him closer into the darkness, but he pushes it away with a grimace. "Any plans?" Monoma's voice rings in Katsuki's head, causing him to flinch reflexively. Nito quickly renews skin contact, just the brush of their elbows, tapping his foot to cause wooden spikes to emerge from the floorboards and send the lizard boy flying away, while Bakugo releases an explosion to singe the knife girl's hair. "If you want to talk in a mental room, think as if you want to communicate. But do not try to project thoughts. Copying freak? I hear you loud and clear, Thorn." Nito glared at the villains who were circling the 2 students again, albeit a little more scorched than last time. "We're going to kick their ass and get the hell out of here." Nito laughs to himself, keeping his outward expression hard and wary. "We need a better plan." "Aren't you tired?" the villainous hand says, waving those same hands. Nito tracks the movement, the red pinwheel spinning. "You're wounded, bleeding, exhausted. It's better for you to surrender than to fight." Nito inhales, exhales, inhales before speaking. "Go to hell." Nito raises his hand back, imitating Todoroki Shoto, and sends blue fire across the room. Nito welcomes the darkness, he embraces the sudden silence, as if trapped inside his own mind. Shinobi never sleep while on duty, at least, ANBU never sleep. While they physically cannot move or force themselves to wake up, shinobi on missions always retain awareness. It's not an easy process, sometimes sensory deprivation can get into their minds and send them spinning until someone skilled in Genjutsu, or Yamanaka, can snap them out of it. Nito was a captain, and he hadn't fallen since he was 15, like Kakashi, and struggling with nightmares. Nito falls and falls and falls. Everything is quiet, motionless, calm, suffocating, peaceful, disturbing and dark. It takes everything Nito has to not fall into a full-blown coma like he's allowed himself to before. He's gotten used to this new world, relaxed when he doesn't have to watch children massacre their own relatives for the greater good. It was like when Kakashi left ANBU and began to rest as a duty jonin. Kakashi breathes and waits. He is waiting. So when everything goes quiet and he can no longer hear the explosions in the darkness and the sound of debris, Kakashi, Nito, Monoma, whoever he is, allows himself to sleep. You're next. Nito comes to his senses immediately, registering the musty air, the sharp smell of medicine, the rough sheets, the needle in his hand, and the constant beeping that sounds. He coughs, disturbing the oxygen mask attached to his face. Someone placed a medical mask on the table to his right, so Nito reaches out to grab it and put it on his face before anyone enters. Nito never liked the feeling of hospitals, which was why he was Konoha's #1 threat. He coughs again, his throat dry as hell. 5 minutes later, with no one coming in, Nito rolls his eyes before pressing the nurse's button. A minute later, a nurse comes in with a glass of water. She presses the glass into Nito's hands, who drinks greedily to relieve his dry throat. She checks his vital signs as he drinks, adjusting the level of morphine in the 4. Nito can still feel the burns running along his neck, slightly stinging the bandages. Wah, his voice breaks, hoarse as he swallows the Silva. How long have I been asleep? He says, looking at the bandages on his fingers. His nails are still bloody, his hands are not shaking, relaxed against the dry hospital sheets. 1 month, the nurse says, handing him the phone. He can vaguely recognize it as his own, with its dogskin case and cracked screen. He takes it, unlocking it with a quick tap of his password, 101007230328. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura's birthdays. The nurse leaves without waiting for him to tell her that if he needs help, press the button again. If he needs more morphine, press the button on the right, connected to the 4. She tells him to call his teachers, since he is a ward of UA. She says, "Your friends and teacher visited every day, they seem to be busy today." Nito nods and she leaves. Nito is left in silence, the beeping heart monitor was turned off, thank God. If it had been left on, Nito would have fled from the balcony, the lights dimmed, and the phone in his hand. He inhales, exhales, before checking his messages. He should call Aizawa or Present Mike. It turns out that the reason they couldn't visit him today was because it was their hero license exam. Aizawa explains this to him. Nito sees the hidden relief in his eyes at seeing his student finally awake. A month has passed, says the teacher, Present Mick standing next to him, his eyes gleaming suspiciously. Welcome back. Nito smiles with both his mouth and his eyes, not paying attention to how much his body hurts even after a month. I'm back. His classmates crowd into his room in groups, Tetsu and Kendo holding his hands as Kendo furiously wipes away his swelling tears while Tetsu shamelessly wets Nito's hand. Nito laughs, running his hand through both of their hair and begins to tousle it as best he can. Midoriya, Todoroki, and Bakugo burst into his room, apparently pushing each other over something. Midoriya instantly focuses his attention on Nito and says breathlessly, "Monoma-kun, please tell Todoroki that I'm not All Might's secret love child." Nito blinks in surprise. "I thought so too," he says, and Midoriya groans, and Todoroki smiles. Bakugo looks at them and rolls his eyes. Midoriya rubs his eyes before looking at Nito once more before quickly bursting into tears. "Oh my god," Nito says. And, "Oh my god," Nito says a minute later. Making Midoriya's hair even worse, ruining Todoroki's split ends, and touching Bakugo's actually quite soft hair. Yaoyorozu, Ida, Mina, Tsuyu, and the others visit him, and relief appears on their faces when they see him awake. Aizawa comes back in, pulls out a chair and sits down on it with a sigh. "Okay, problem child," he groans, "no freaking out until recovery girl says so. You'll be released from the hospital in 3 days to be monitored for full recovery in the university dorms. All your classmates have moved into new dorms, and once you're out, they'll help you move your old stuff." Nito nods. "Can I leave earlier than in 3 days?" He is 16 now.